Yeah, this was important stuff. So welcome back. This is week 4, day 2, part 1. And we're starting off the day before we get into Django, talking about complex data coming back from an API. Data will very rarely just be nice and beautiful. So when we deal with data, we just make the assumption that we're going to deal with complex data. And the challenge that I had proposed prior to recording was that I want to traverse being just walking over this complex data, and I want to show the temp min and the temp max here. And I want to also show how I can get to it. So the way that I work through it is I've got my complex object here in a variable called x, and this variable contains a ton of information, just not very useful information at all. So with that x, I know that the x is the dictionary type by saying I can do x.keys. If that was a list and I did list.keys, it would give me an error. So I know that by typing x.keys, it's an important point to make that is telling me it's a dictionary. I can also say what's the type of x. It'll tell me it's a dictionary. So that's very useful. So I'm going to say x.keys told me that there is a code, a message, a count, a list, and a city. Well, I could say I want to get x square bracket list, and that should get me back a bunch more information, right? That's the meat and potatoes of our stuff. So, with that being said, I know if it's a list, I can go after it how. If it's a list, how can I access the first element in a list? What are all of these numbers here? Yes. So I should be able to just say x square bracket list, and then I can put another square bracket after it to show the 0. And that will show me the first one. Okay, so we got this first one here. Now this is what this data looks like. So if I was to flatten this out, make it nice and easily navigatable, it would look like this. Well, I can fly these out here. So let's see, where's the temp min and temp max? Okay, there's temp min, temp max. But that's under the dot keys. So I could do, since that's a dictionary again, I can ask for the dot keys over and over again. And then I have this main attribute here. So I can just keep traversing here. I could say I want the square bracket main. And notice that I'm arrowing up and I'm just adding all this stuff to my variable that I'm asking for. Okay, so I've got my temp min and my temp max right there. I can also ask for the dot keys there, and I can see my temp min and temp max. So with that, I can say temp min is 299,744. Temp max are those two values. Now I said that I wanted to get the difference between them. So what I would do is I would just assign that to a variable like this. Say I have max and min. Whoops. Let me go ahead and assign that. And then I can say max minus min. We'll say there's a difference between 1.79 degree Kelvin. Right? That's what the Kelvin is? Or that's what the temperature is in? Cool. So, how comfortable are you all with this notation here? Pretty comfortable?
Makes sense.
It makes more sense to me now than when you do it. I was having a really hard time identifying things like that last time.
Well, that was that JSON view would be nice.
Yeah.
Figure out
Yeah,
what
that's
was a group, and then I finally got it. But that makes it a lot easier.
JSON Viewer is a great start. It's definitely not going to change your life. Ultimately, understanding how to traverse it through code, like being able to know how to use dot keys to your advantage, is very useful, because I used a dictionary dot keys so many times just so I could see what all of this stuff is. And then I can then go from there to say, what's X code? I can learn more about it that way. I find that when I go more at it from this direction, I forge a longer lasting bond with the data versus if I just add it here, I might just skim over it. I don't really dig in deep of how it's structured. So This is crazy. You get the sea level. Oh, it's because the tides. I'm like, we're like sinking into the sea. We're gonna die in 4.5 years. All right. So that is, just a basic overview of the difference, in JSON, because we're going to be dealing with a lot of JSON. Arrays, or not arrays, lists and dictionaries are the complex types. And I mentioned this in like week 2 when we first started talking about dictionaries, and week 1 when we first started talking about lists. I mentioned this then that you can put dictionaries within dictionaries within dictionaries and then put a list at the bottom of it and then another dictionary. You could do that as long as your computer can handle it. And so the fact that you can means that a lot of external developers will do that. So we have to be ready for that, especially if we're using an external source. So, all right. And one more thing before we move on to Django is that somehow we were able to make it to week 4 without talking about dates or times, or date times, as I like to call them. And there's 2 main things that we need to cover with date times, because you will be working with dates and times a lot. Let me go ahead and jump into Atom here. We're going to create a day 3. Wait, is today day 2 or day 3? Day 2. Did I say it was day 3 earlier? Okay, good. I'm going to go into my text editor, and I'm going to make a day 2, I'm going to say date times. Datetime.py. Because times and dates are difficult. Calendar math is hard. Like, don't make any mistake about that. Calendar math is like saying it's June 22nd, 1976. I want to subtract 23 days from that month, from that day. What month is it? Or like what day of the month is it? It's like you need to know how many days there are in May. You need to subtract that many days from June, and you need to start counting backwards from the last day in May. So if I said subtract 63 days from June 22nd, that's a little bit harder. If I said we're going to go back through February, like subtract 200 days, then we also need to know if it's a leap year. In 1976, was it a leap year? I don't know. So calendar math is very difficult, especially when you take into account complex challenges like that. So that's why we have a date time type. And there's also a date type and a time type, but I prefer to use the date time type. So let's get a quick introduction on date time. So if I import date time, what are some things that I can do with date time? Well, there are mainly 2 things that we're going to do. So part 1 of this is going to be stirf time, and the second part is going to be strip time. Don't worry, it's not as fun as it sounds.
So quick question before we get too far ahead about the thing that you've done in the terminal. So with the brackets, you're able to communicate with lists and dictionaries through that as long as you're using the appropriate values?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I was to say, Kevin, X square bracket list, what is the data type of that? You would say,
List 0.
well, no, just what I've highlighted here. Ignore all the stuff to the right of this. What's that?
List.
It's a dictionary.
Dictionary.
Because a dictionary you look up by value or by key. So you're like, I have a string that I want to look this up by. A list, you look it up by its physical location. Like, where is it at? Is it the first? Is it the second? Or is it the third? If I had you all as a row of people, I would say I want X square bracket John, X square bracket Kevin, and it's very fast to be able to do that. But if I had this first row up here, I would say X, and it's a list. I would say X first person, X second person, X third person. I didn't really care about their name because I didn't know it. But in the case of where I was looking up my dictionary, I was able to say I want to get the person not from their physical location, but what their name is.
Well, so X there is the dictionary. X bracket list, that object would be a list.
Yes, that would return a list. Like so if I said what type of object is returned from X list from this statement, your answer would be a list because the next object over is going to be a square bracket 0 lookup. Now I say that of course, but you can put a 0 as a key in a dictionary. I don't recommend it ever. Ever. I don't ever recommend that. It's just not a good idea. That should just be a list. If you have a dictionary that's keys are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, put it into a list. And then that 0 item is going to give me a dictionary, which is going to give me another dictionary. So when you see those square brackets added onto each other, you know that your structure is just dictionary upon dictionary upon dictionary. And then occasionally you'll hit a list. So you'll make sure that you do the square bracket 0. Okay, I'm in a list. Now that list is going to be a list of dictionaries. So now we're back into the square bracket key lookups. Yeah.
Well, so that, like in the weather thing, that makes an example. I mean, that makes sense where you would use what, because like the list part of it is just a list of all the different points in time where they took the data. So there's no reason not to just, you don't need to call it by key. Just
You want to hit the first one. I want to hit the second one.
dictionary with specifics.
Especially if all of those dictionaries are the same. Like that makes for an optimal use case where, you know, if main or if X list is going to be a list, then the dictionary that's contained within that list, like if there's 5 dictionaries, they should all have the same keys and values. Like that's sort of a design pattern. Like you should know that every dictionary in that X list, or in there at least in the main subcategory, will have those keys in it. So you can iterate over it and say, I want to see this key, I want to see that key, and that way I can just for loop over every element in X list, and then show all of the temp max for all of the measurements that were gotten. I mean, if I did that, then I could probably collect all of the min and max, get the difference, and then get the difference average. Right? Because if I get all of them, I could then do more math on it. But we didn't have to do that today. So, yeah. Any more questions? Cool. So there's 2 main things that we need to think about with date time, and that's stirf time and strip time. And stirf time, I'm going to make this note here. I want you to make this note as well. Takes a date time and turns it into a string. And strip time takes a string and turns it into a date time. Much like JSON.dumps will, well, I guess JSON.dumps is more like stirf time here. We didn't really talk about JSON.loads, where it takes a string and then converts that to a native object. We just sort of took a native object and turned it into a string. Okay, so let's see what we could do here. I'm going to go ahead and create a datetime object. And creating datetimes is a little weird. This is kind of a stain on Python's import syntax, so just bear with me. So I'm going to create a datetime that represents now, and that's going to be datetime.now. That's all you have to do for that. And if I print what now is, and then I run my day 2 datetime program, whoops, this is what I'm talking about. The syntax is not great, because what it says is that the module datetime has no attribute now. So what we need to do is we need to access from the module to say datetime.datetime.now.
When I imported it last night, I had to do from date time.
That's another way you can do it as well. That's where I was going to say, like, it's weird to type that out though. Like, it makes sense to do something like from, don't type this along with me, from Flask import Flask, lowercase f, capital F. You're importing in a class and you're accessing its constructor. But for datetimes, we say from datetime import datetime, and that can sometimes be pretty confusing about what you're actually importing. So just know that in the Python library, in the standard library, there's a module called datetime. Within there, there is a variable called datetime that will create a datetime object for you. So, this is my datetime. This datetime appears to know, well, I guess it's just picking from my computer's time. But if you were to ask for what type this is, it would tell you it's a datetime.datetime. This is why I showed you that, because I didn't want anybody to be confused by seeing what the heck is a datetime.datetime. It is a datetime class, or it's an object created from a class called datetime from the datetime module. So what kind of cool things can we do with a datetime? Well, we can say I want the now.hours. I think it's hours. No. Okay. So if I don't know that it's hours, what's a way that you could see all the attributes on an object? In any object in Python? Dir. It's a super useful command. I can come in here and say like, oh, it wasn't hours, it was hour. Or as I like to say, hour. I don't ever like to say that. So if I was to say now.hour, it would say 9. I could also say, what is the month? 6. The year? So you notice that like this is a complex object that I can ask for individual things on. To the point where, check this out, this is a cool little trick. I'm going to import time, and I'm going to say time.sleep, and I'm going to say 10. And I'm going to grab another variable, call it now.
You can call it hey now. You're an all-star.
I was going for the Spaceballs reference there.
Fair.
When will then be now? Soon. Okay, so if I have now and I have now, I can do a comparison on those things. So I could say, is now.hour the same as now.hour? I'll let our program run for about 10 seconds. Maybe I shouldn't let it run for 10 seconds. That's a long time. Like, do you ever like have just 10 seconds of silence while 3 people are staring at you? It's a long 10 seconds. So let me go ahead and switch that down to like 3 seconds. But what I could do now is that, let's see, let's take a look at the second. See if those two are the same. We can compare these two. We can see that the seconds are not the same. So it actually has some semblance of capturing time. That's really cool. So that's a datetime object. You could do cool things with it. You can also, let me mention, I'm going to take out time now. We're going to get rid of all this mention of now, because that's just kind of strange. Because I'm going to talk about a better way to do time differences. Is I'm going to now import time delta from datetime. So I have from datetime, import datetime, and time delta. And by the way, I just deleted all the stuff from now, so delete all that stuff too. Otherwise you'll get syntax errors. So time delta allows me as a developer to subtract or add time to a datetime object. And I can specify what that interval is. So for example, I can make a variable, call it 1 year. And I'm going to create a time delta object that says year equal to 1. I think I got that right. It's been a while since I've done a time delta by hand. So if I was to print 1 year now, Is it years? Hold on a second.
So they're all from daytime. Would they probably tend to share like the same syntax?
What do you mean?
So like when we were looking up things for daytime, you saw like year hour. Will that probably be likely the same for time delta? Or is that not always the case? Or like they're both like daytimes their parents, and will they probably share some?
Date times will always have like an hour and a year. So like that's you're creating an instance of a date time, and so it's going to have all the same attributes as any other date time. All right, so yeah, so my mistake. There's no years. We can say days is equal to 365, and that way when I print this out, it's 365 days. What would be an easy way for me to say? Well, I guess that doesn't account for a leap year. Oh well. I could just give it 1,000 days. Like we can just say times 30, like 30 years, right? Like roughly 30 years, 10,000 days. So what I can do now is I can say I want to print what now would be if I subtracted 1 year from it. Or it's not necessarily 1 year anymore. It's more like many years, 30 years. And we can see what that date time will be if we subtract that many years from. So now we're at 1988. You kind of like zero this in here. So let's say let's say 34 years. Okay, now we're at 1984, June 13th, 1984. Let's do 35. Okay, now we're at June 14th, 1983. So I can add 4 more days to that. Whoops, I went the wrong way. Oh, what I want to do now is I don't want to multiply that. I want to do plus 4. Order of operations here. There we go. If it doesn't get you the right direction, just flip the operator. And now we're at June 18th, 1983, which is the day I was born. So it's a fun little exercise to try to get back to, like, work slowly towards the day that you were born. And I did that by taking a date time and then subtracting it by a time delta. Now, you know what's a really fun exercise? Is to see what year is it going to be, like what year this year, or how old will I have to be for this year to be my half birthday, or for like my half lifetime? Like, if this year was my half life, what year is my death year? 5/23, 2053. That's a good round. There's like a 2, a 5, and a 3, and a 0 in there. Yeah. That's 70 years I was alive, roughly.
Technology nowadays, you gotta have 30 for you. Don't worry.
Yeah. 70 is the new 30. Although if I keep feeling like this, probably no more than 10. So time deltas are very useful because it allows you to do math with days. So you can say, what time is, or what day would it be minus 1 day, plus 1 day, plus 1 week, plus 5 hours. Like what time will it be in 5 hours? So you can kind of be a little clever here. So let's leave 1 year. I'm gonna say like 1 minute, or 1 minute is equal to time delta. And I'm gonna say seconds is equal to 60. And then what I'm gonna do, check this out.
So is there only seconds and days as far as that's concerned?
Seconds, days, no, there's a couple of different ones. There's microseconds, milliseconds, minutes, hours, and weeks. So yeah, so you can get fairly good for it. But yeah, so what I want to show here is this kind of cool little thing, is that I want to say that my end time is, let's see, now plus 1 minute. Okay? So that means that when I print the end time, and let's just comment all these out. That means that the end time would have been at 9:46. So here's a fun little thing. Are you all coding along with me, by the way, or are you just kind of like letting this go? Okay. What I want to do is I want to see whose computer can run the most cycles. Well, that would actually be a bad. So if I say the counter is equal to 0, and I'm going to say while date time dot now is less than end time, counter plus equals 1. And then I'm going to print the counter at the end. So what this pretty much does is it calculates 1 minute into the future, and then it iterates until the now time, because it recalculates this date time dot now every iteration. It says, is this still less than the end time? And then when it gets to past it, it stops calculating. So I can let this sit here, and it does its work for 1 minute, and let's see how many times it will go through this for loop, or this while loop, in 60 seconds.
I ended up putting my front counter in the wall loops.
Nice, nice. That's one way that you get some instant feedback. Anybody got any good jokes?
At least another 30 seconds.
You think it's 30 seconds have gone by so far?
We should
What's that?
have done 30 seconds.
Yeah, we should have done something a lot smaller. We're going to take a second to meditate here. You know that I actually have a hypothesis that John's is going to be drastically lower than me and Zach's, even though his computer is much newer.
We basically
What
have
do we have?
the same.
Basically have the same years.
Oh, well.
57 million.
Don't let anybody tell you that a print statement won't slow your computer down.
Drastically, I mean, that's literally a quarter.
What did yours end up being?
I must have.
Your wild is it still running?
No, it just gave me. It didn't give me the counter.
Run it again.
Let me see your.
So now if you're in the store comparing computer models, you can just put yourself
What are you doing, sir? If you don't mind.
This is a new benchmark. Are you running your program again? Did you lower it to 30 and then we can just double it? I wonder if we can just do that. Like if I just do this by 10
That is.
and then multiply it by 6. Also, it takes into consideration like the other programs that are running on your computer. All right, so let's take this. Wow,
Wow, yeah, that's really accurate.
that's fairly consistent.
Okay, now mine did 94 million.
But when you took out the print,
So it went from 11.
almost twice as fast.
Wow. No, that's
9 times faster.
yeah.
You said 90 million?
94 million.
I got
from
90.
11.
I got 90
Well, twice as fast of
Oh,
mine
yeah.
is 57 million, so twice as fast would be 100 million. So, or 114 million.
I was talking about with the print statement, it was 9.
Oh, yeah, I gotcha.
That's crazy.
Nuts. Yeah, that's.
I wouldn't think it would make that huge. I mean, I figured it would make a difference, but I figured maybe cut it in half, but not.
Yeah,
not.
And then I'm sure if we wrote this in like Go or in C, we would see it jump from 57 million to like 300 million. So it's a good way to benchmark your CPU. That's really all it's testing though. It's just saying it's not really taking any RAM into consideration. If you want to take RAM into consideration, you can create absurdly large objects. Like typically you can just read in a big chunk of memory from the computer and then make deep copies of it, so that every time it iterates through, it like eats up another kilobyte. And so, 50 or 95 million times through 1 kilobyte, like that's gonna destroy your computer. So don't do that. But every iteration through, it's gonna reload, make a deep copy. So that will hit your RAM. It won't hit your hard disk, but it will affect a lot of things. But I've never written benchmarking programs. It's just these sort of basic, like, this is a relative benchmark, not really a benchmark that's like, oh, this is an industry standard. That, like, I would never say that this would be the mark of a good computer. It's like, well, this is 95 million iterations for 1 minute. So really, but all that's really telling you is that how well that Python program ran then, and then we were able to compare it to each other's computer. And I knew, like your guys, once you took out the print statement, it was going to just completely blow mine away. Because mine is, a lot of people arguably say that the 2015 model is the last great MacBook model. So this is I'm going to be buried with this computer. But once this thing fries, I'm going to be so sad. Probably not buy another MacBook, but hey, when the time comes. Okay. What's that?
What's wrong with the new MacBook?
Nothing. Nothing's wrong with the new MacBooks.
Nothing.
The keyboard. The keyboard is what's wrong with them.
Yeah, that was.
I like
I feel like when I type on one of those Mac keyboards, I feel like it's from the Star Trek: The Next Generation,
Yeah.
where they like are just typing on glass,
Yeah.
which they never talked about the practicality of just typing on glass until everybody got tablets, and they're like, I'm gonna type on there. You're like, I can't feel anything, and I'm just making huge mistakes. Like, typing is such a tactile thing, especially like we totally downplay those little nubs that are on F and J. Like, I look for those little nubs every time I touch my keyboard. Anyways, so that's date times. Let's get back to date times though, because we're not done, and then we can take a quick break. So that is time delta. So let me go ahead and time delta. I'm going to not do this while loop. I'm just going to get rid of that. That was kind of silly, but let's just leave it here with the time delta 1 year. You can also subtract, like I showed you. You could say, like, if this is going to be 35 years ago. Whoops. What programming language is this? Oh, you can't do that.
You can't start a variable.
You actually can. I don't know why I said you couldn't do that. I can say like 35 ASDF.
I thought it said
Wait, can you not do that?
you can't do it enough. You can't start a variable.
Yeah, you can't do that, but you can do that. Thank you for reminding me of that. So yeah. Anyways, it's not really good practice to use the actual numbers in there anyway. Write them all out. Let's just make sure that this program runs and we can continue on talking about date time, or stirf time and strip time. Okay, cool. So date time, or stirf time, allows us to take a date time object and output it to any format of string that we want to. This is very useful when we want to, maybe we want to output a human readable string. Because if I create a now, well, I already have a now, and I print now, it's going to look like that. And like if I was to send that to my mom, she'd like probably be a little upset about what all this business is here. Or like, let's just say that anybody, right? Anybody might want more of a human readable thing. So there's a website called stirftime.org that is a guide that we're going to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to say now.stirftime, and we're going to pass it a string. And that string is going to be a template for how it outputs our time. So for example, if I wanted to say what day of the week it is, and only the day of the week, I will put in that string %A. By the way, you're not expected to memorize these. That's why stirftime.org exists.
Do you have to import anything to get that to work, or is that like
No.
a function of date time?
It's a function on datetime. It's a method that's available to a datetime. So when I run this, watch what happens to my date time. It says that today's Tuesday. Now, if I wanted to add to that, I could just put literals in here. So I could put a comma space, and I can go back, and then I can put the day of the month as a 0 padded decimal number. So that's going to be percent lowercase d. Oh, wait, no. Monday, comma space, and then I would say September. So that would be percent b. I need to close out of this. So I would say percent b. Capital B. So my template string now says percent %a, comma space, percent %b. Now watch what that shows up as. Tuesday, June. Whoa, we're getting there. What do you think the next thing I should put in there is? The day. That's how we do it here in the States. So the next thing is going to be percent lowercase d. Of course, Adam gets confused about that.
If you didn't want the comma between Tuesday and June, you could just take the comma off the string.
That is correct. If you don't want the comma after there, you can take that string, that comma literal out of there. Interestingly enough, you can really put whatever you want in this template string. I can say like debug colon space and then put a bunch of the template variables here.
Noodle Tuesday.
So when I run this, Noodle Tuesday, yes, I love it. Let's do that. So instead of debug, we're going to say Noodle Tuesday, or think about this. Let's go back a little bit. Let's print now.day. Now.day is number 5. What if I want the day of the week?
Comma and then percent.
Well, what I'm going for here is I want to do like, there's a day of the week. Whereas ISO weekday. Or you can just say weekday. Weekday, so if I was to say now.weekday, and that you would think that would just give you a true or false if it was Monday through Friday. But that tells you, I guess that's a method we have to call. Tells you a number 1. So that means that 0 is Monday, 1 is Tuesday. So I could do something like if now.weekday is double equal to 1, we can say print noodles. And then down here, I could just say, I don't have to say it's noodle. But see, it's noodles because it's Tuesday. So that's how you would use something that's like a date time to your advantage. It's also really useful for like, I mean, not that we're going to write a schedule here, but there are programs that you can run in the background that will schedule tasks for you. And what it'll do is it'll essentially run on an interval of like maybe once every 1 second or once every 5 seconds. And it'll see, do I have anything that's scheduled to run? So what's going to happen is it's going to have a separate process that schedules those tasks to run, and it's going to look at its date time. It's going to say, my date time is now later than anything that was scheduled to run. If I have anything scheduled to run, I need to now run it. So like I said, we won't be running a scheduler. We could write our own scheduler from what we know, but we're not going to. You could do it with a database and a Python program. Excuse me. All right. So Sturf Time allows you to have some fun with that. You can do really anything you want with that. You can put the hour, you can put the year. So you can do nice formattings on your Tuesday, June 5th. And then we can put the comma at the end there. We can put the year, capital Y, or we could say, like, without the century is just 13, or 18 in our case. But there's lots of other things in here, too, that you can add in. I really like %C. It's nice. Or %X is also really nice. It's a freebie. So I could just change all of this to say %X. Whew. And it would give me 6518. That's what we're used to seeing. So that's how you could take a datetime object that is native to Python and convert it to something that's nice and pretty output. Any questions on that? You're gonna mix up what surf time and strip time do for a long time. Like you're gonna know what they both do, but you're not gonna probably remember which one is the right use case. If you get it right 50% of the time, that's still pretty good odds. If you're like, I want to convert this string to a datetime object. Strip time? I don't know. We'll see. Sometimes the syntax can be the guide, though, because with this one, with surf time, all you provided is your template string, and with a strip time, you provide it. It works a little bit different. So, all right.
So if you're doing strip time from it, you already have the, like I was doing yesterday, you already have that, and you have to put those, you have to match those, what are those called where you do the percent A?
Those are like template variables there.
Variables.
It's a little parameters.
So you have to match those to the string you're putting in.
Yep, that's exactly what we're going to do. So don't worry about that. I got you, fam. So the question that John had is if we have a date time that looks like this, how can I convert that to a date time object? Because John got this, or you all got this back from the API, and he wanted to do some stuff from the API to say like, what is this? I guess. So what you can do is we're gonna do strip time now. Oops. It's not spelled strip time. Some people pronounce it stirp time, but I think stirp time sounds kind of goofy. All right. There's also documentation here, so that's really useful. I want to find a quick use of it. Right, okay. So the thing I couldn't remember is if it was on the datetime module. So the thing is that I need to... Oh, wait, no, this is fine. This is fine. This will work. So if I wanted to have, say, my underscore time is equal to that string, I want to convert that string to be a Python datetime object. Unfortunately, I can't just say, Python, take this string and figure it out. It's smart. It really is. Python is an incredibly smart language, but it's still a computer and it can't figure stuff out on its own. We're not quite there. I believe in our lifetime, well, in my lifetime, since I'm going to be 70 years old, we will see programming that will be smart enough that we can just pass it something. It will run it through 90 million iterations through a neural network and in the blink of an eye, and it'll say, this is your time. Or this is your date time object, or something like that. We're going to see programming in a completely different light in 20 years. I mean, I already see programming from a different light than when I started almost a decade ago. So, and then even then, the previous decade is completely different. So when we have my time, I want to convert my time into a Python datetime object. Also, because I can't do my time.day, right? I can't do that. Why can't I do that, Kevin? Because it's a string, exactly. My time.day doesn't exist. I could do like my time.upper, right? Like we could do that all day. That's a string method. I can't do any of the date time methods, so that's why I want to convert it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say converted time is equal to datetime.striptime. I'm going to pass the variable, the string, as the first argument. And now we need to pass the template in which we are parsing. And we need to match it. Like this is like a code that we have to crack. So let's go back over to stirf time. We can use this to our advantage. First off, what we do is we look to see, is there anything that matches this format? No. I could have told you that right now. Is there anything that's close? Well, close only counts in two things. Yep, and sometimes hot dogs. So what we need to do is it's a video game I have. I'll have to show you guys that game sometime. It's a lot of fun. I'll have you guys over sometime. It's a virtual shooting range. like in VR. And so you just have guns and you shoot them. And nobody gets shot. It's like the best way to enjoy a gun without having to worry about killing somebody. You just shoot it all over the place. It's your wildest fantasies. It's like Westworld. Anyways, so I want to parse that. But there's no easy way to do it. Well, welcome to programming. There is no easy way to do it. So what we're going to do is we need to code out our own. We need to parse this out so that we can turn this into a datetime object. So let's break it down into its parts, because that's all programming really is, right? We break it down into its parts. What's the first part? The year. So where would I find the year up here? And notice that the year requires the century. So what is that? I'll pump that up for you. There we go. Now we can read it. Percent capital Y. All right, so if I say percent capital Y. By the way, what do you think will happen when you run your program and you haven't really provided it a full template string? John, don't answer this if you know it, because I know you've already played with script time. What do you think will happen? What could happen?
So you can error.
It could error.
Or
It-
print just the one value.
Right. Okay. So that's like the perfect example of the two things that I would think as a programmer that can happen. It will either completely error, or it will just show me the percent y that I passed to it. Yep. And it's actually a really good error. Unconverted data remains, and then it gives me everything else that's not the year. Okay. So I've got the year there, but then I've got a hyphen. So what the heck do I do there with that hyphen?
If it works like the print now, serve time, you just add it in.
Add it in there. That's exactly it. And we can iteratively run this to see if we're right. So we can run it, and look, now it says, oh, we need to move on to 0604. Perfect. So
Cone.
exactly, it's like a cone. So now I need the 06, which is the day of the month as a zero padded decimal number. Because if we don't do a zero padded, what do you think will happen if we don't do a zero padded?
It's going to start at 0.
Right, it's going to think that it's month 0.
It's not the day of the month. It's the month.
Oh, you're right. I'm still in like, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I passed it? Right. Month as a zero padded decimal number is percent %m. So we can say percent %m. Let's run it. There we go. We're making progress. Do a hyphen, and then we can do that is the day of the month as percent %d. YMD is a very common abbreviation for strip time and surf time. So you will remember that eventually, like YMD. It's very easy. But you'll never remember which one is the uppercase one.
Luckily, they also are pretty kind to relate those to actual words.
Yeah.
Year, month, day.
Yeah.
So it's not the worst to remember.
All right, so now I've got 1800 here. All right, do we have anything that's close to that? Locale's appropriate time representation? Let's try that. So if I do space percent %x, I have a date time. I added a percent %x at the end of it. So if we say print converted time, let's see what that shows us.
Okay, so it was automatically determined if it's 24 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because the alternative is like, if you so if you passed it 3, like I think you would have to tell it specifically if it was 12-hour.
Yeah, but yeah, there's one for 12 hour, one for 24 hour, and then
Which is the one for 12-hour?
go up.
But that's just for minute though, or hour, right? So you couldn't use percent %x.
Right.
If you wanted to
It's
do
really
that.
useful thing, otherwise you'd have to do hour, minute, second.
Yeah. So yeah, so I could say converted time dot year, and it parsed it out for me. Very useful stuff. But those are the main 3 methods you're going to use from date time: time delta, strf time, and strip time. That's really all you need to know about date times in Python. And Python, by the way, handles date times very well. Like I've been to a bunch of different programming languages, and used a bunch of different examples of getting the time now and subtracting 1 week from it. I'd say Python does it about the best with the time delta model. That way it just clicks in my head. So hopefully it clicks in your head. All right, so let's go take a break. I need to refill on coffee and blow my nose. And then we're going to come back and we're going to start on Django. Yay!